Okay, so right now we are going to do lesson 1-3, literal equations. And all that a literal equation is an equation full of variables that you rearrange to solve for a specific variable. And I'm going to say that in a different way. It's an equation full of variables where you choose one of those variables and you set the equation equal to that variable. And I will demonstrate what that looks like in just a minute. At the top of your notes of 1-3, you will see an example of the Celsius equation converted here to a Fahrenheit equation, okay, where you could solve for F. So here they're taking the Celsius equation, they're solving it for Celsius, but then you can plug it back into the Fahrenheit equation or the Celsius equation to solve for the Fahrenheit. And so that's kind of what we're going to be doing with some of our other equations as well. Down at the bottom is a list of formulas. We have perimeter of a rectangle, circumference of a circle. Circumference of the circle is the same as a perimeter of a circle. Area of a rectangle, area of a triangle, area of a circle. A lot of times people will get the circumference and area of a circle formulas mixed up, so be careful with that. Distance formula and temperature, which in this case it's set equal to Celsius. Okay, so sometimes we may need to refer back to this, and you will have a quiz on all of these formulas coming up, so make sure you are familiar with these. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn to page 2. Before we begin moving through equations and rearranging those variables, we're going to first, I'm first going to show you how to solve an equation for a specific X value to determine what Y is. Okay, so basically, in simplified terms, we're just going to take the X value of -2, we're going to plug it into this equation, and we're going to solve for Y. Okay, I will be showing you 2 ways to do this. You need to choose which method you prefer best. Okay, so I'm going to start out with Y, the original equation, Y plus 4X equals 5. Okay, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this -2 and I'm going to plug it in where the X is and solve for Y. Okay, so I will be rewriting my equation Y plus 4 times -2, okay, equals 5. And I can continue solving. 4 times -2 is a -8. And really the way to write this, instead of plus a negative, you could just put write Y minus 8 equals 5. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 8 to both sides. This cancels out and I'm left with Y equals 8 plus 5 is 13. Okay. And then I continue to do this for the value of X being 0 and the value of X being 5. So you'll do this 3 times to figure out all the different values for Y. Okay. This is one way to do it. Okay. Now, when I solve for 0, I'm going to show you the second option that you have. So instead of just plugging 0 into where the X is, oops, I do this quite often. I have to use whiteout to cover up my mistakes. Okay, so you have Y plus 4X equals 5. What I'll do now is, instead of just plugging the number in, I'm going to rearrange my equation and set it equal to Y. And then that way I'm only working on one side of the equation. So what I want to do is I want this equation to be a Y equals. Instead of Y plus 4X equals, I want it just to be Y equals, which means I need to move my 4X to the other side of the equation. So I'm going to subtract 4X from this side and then subtract 4X from this side. Okay. So these end up canceling each other out, and I'm left with Y equals 5 minus 4X. So I've rearranged my equation set equal to y. Now I'm going to plug in the 0 into where x is and solve for y. So y equals 5 minus 4 times 0. Okay. Y equals 5 minus 4 times 0 is 0. Y equals 5. So I've just showed you two ways to solve the same type of problem. One is just keeping the equation the way that it originally was, plugging in that value and still solving for y. The other way is to rearrange the equation set equal to the variable you're looking for. So we're looking for y. So we set the equation equal to y and then solve. Okay. Either way works. A lot of students believe that this is the most simple way. So you just need to use whatever way works for you. So now I'm going to solve by plugging 5 into my equation. And I will be going over into the practice. We're actually not going to do the practice side. We're just going to do the example side. So let's see. I'm going to choose this method over here. Y plus 4x equals 5. And I'm going to plug in 5 where my x is. Y plus 4 times 5 equals 5. So 4 times 5 is 20. And then I subtract 20 from both sides. That cancels out. And y equals negative 15. Okay. And if you want, you could just cross this off. So the answer to this problem is that y equals 13, 5, and negative 15. Okay. And there's problem 1. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move down to examples 2 and 3, and I'll go a little bit quicker since you know the format of how this is going to work. I am going to just go ahead and write down my equation. 6y plus 3x equals 12. And if you know how to do this and you want to stop the video and just check your answers, you may do that. Sometimes that's the best way that people learn. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in negative 2 where the x is. So I have 6y plus 3 times negative 2 equals 12. And my goal is to figure out what y is when x is negative 2. 6y minus 6 equals 12. Why is it minus? Because a positive 3 times a negative 2 is a negative 6. And then I will add 6 to both sides. 6y equals 18. And then when I divide both sides by 6, y equals 3. Okay. So when x is negative 2, y is 3. Now I'm going to do the next one. This time we're figuring out what y is when x is 1. Okay, so this isn't going to be a whole number. One thing you need to remember when you end up with fractions is that you always need to simplify them. So the simplified version of 9 over 6 is going to be 3 over 2. And I do like you to keep them as improper fractions. And students ask me why. It's because when we get into graphing, we need to graph using improper fractions rather than mixed numbers or decimals. All right. We're going to cross off this practice too, because we're not going to do it. We're going to do our last one. 6y plus 3x equals 12. And the question is, what is y when x is 5? and y equals -1/2. Okay, so then my final answer for this problem is that y equals 3, 3/2, and -1/2. Okay. All right. Moving down, again, we're not going to do practice 3, just example 3. And we are going to write out our equation 3x equals 2y minus 4. So our question is, what is y when x is -2? So 3 times -2. Okay, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And a lot of students ask, can I leave my final answer like this? And the answer is yes. You don't always have to have your variable first. Okay, so when x is -2, y is -1. What is y when x is 4? That's the next one. So when x is 4, y is -8. Now, what is y when x is 8? So if x is 8, we're going to figure out what that y is. 3 times 8 is 24. Then we add 8 to both sides, and we get 32 equals 2y. We divide by 2, and we get 16 equals y. So the answer to this example 3 is that y equals -1, 8, and 16, based on the given values of y. Okay. So okay, so we're going to move to page 3. Page 3 are there's a few word problems on this. And all it is that you're going to use the equation it's asking you to use, and then you're going to solve for a given value, a given unknown or an unknown value. So anytime that you're solving word problems, a lot of times it's really good to draw a diagram to represent your shape, the shape that you're working with, or the image that you're working with. And then you can write out your equation, and then you can plug in, using that equation, you plug in the values that you're given, and then you solve for the one that you're looking for, or the unknown measurement. Okay, so we're going to practice that right now. So in example 4, a glassmaker wants to make a triangular piece of glass to fit her mosaic artwork. So I already know that I'm going to need a triangle. So I'm just going to draw that out right here. Okay. The side of the glass that forms the base of the triangle is 50 inches. So this is typically our base right here, and this is 50 inches. Okay. So notice I drew my diagram, and then I'm plugging in the information they give me, and then I'll write out my equation. So it's 50 inches long, and the area of the entire piece of glass is 3,000 inches squared. So the area is 3,000 inches squared. Okay. It asks, what is the length L of the side of the glass that forms the height of the triangle? This is a perfect example of how sometimes they word it kind of strangely. Okay. So in this case, it says, what is the length that forms the height? Well, when I think about that, we know triangles as having a height, not a length. So I'm going just I'm just going to write this as the height. So this is what we're looking for right here. H, the height of the triangle. The other thing that you have to ask yourself is, what formula am I looking for? Well, since they're giving you, or they're saying that they're giving you the area, then you're going to be writing down the formula for the area of a triangle. Okay, so the area of a triangle, if you didn't know, you could always flip back to that first page. And it says right here, area of a triangle. There's two different ways you can write it. Half the base times the height, or base times height divided by 2. And I know a lot of us like to use base times height divided by 2. So that's the one I'm going to use. So I've determined the formula. Now I'm going to take the values that were given to me that I've written over here. I'm going to plug them in where they belong into the equation. So A represents area, and the area is 3,000. Now, one thing I'm finding students do is, because it's inches squared, they like to square the area, but that's not what you need to do in this case. You're just going to write down 3,000 for the area. And then we know that the base is 50. We do not know what the height is. That's what we're looking for. So that remains as H, and then we have to divide by 2. Okay. Now there's two ways that you could solve this equation. You could take 50 and divide it by 2, and then you have 25. But it doesn't always work like that. A lot of times you'll end up with a weird decimal that's hard to work with. So even though that makes most sense here, we won't always do that. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And I think in another problem, we will try the other way. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to divide 50 divided by 2, and I end up with, I'm going to actually write that down here, 3,000 equals 50 divided by 2 is 25, 25H. Okay, and then I'm going to bring this up here because I ran out of room. And then we're back to solving a one-step equation. In order to figure out the height, we have to isolate that H. So we're going to divide both sides by 25. Okay, this cancels out. And if you don't know what 3,000 divided by 25 is, you just set it up like this. And then add a 0 down here. So it's 120 is the height. Now that's not your final answer. That's what a lot of students put, and then I'll mark it off because they don't put the units with it. But the height is actually 120 inches. That would be your final answer for this one, okay? All right. Let's go ahead and go to example 5. What is the circumference of a circle with a radius of 5? Okay, so I'm going to draw out my circle. And it's asking for the circumference. The circumference is the distance around the circle. Another name for that would be perimeter. But it does have a radius here. Radius is half the distance from the center of the circle to the outer edge of 5 meters. Okay, well, it's asking for circumference. So I'm going to look and find what the circumference of a circle is. There's two formulas, 2 pi r or pi times the diameter. So there's two ways you could do this. If you wanted to just do pi times the diameter, you just double the radius. But if you forget that, you'll want to use 2 pi r. So I'm going to use 2 pi r. And the other thing you need to know is, what is the value of pi? Pi, we're going to use 3.14, okay? So I'm going to plug in the information they give us. They're asking for circumference, so I'm going to leave this as C. They give us the value of 2. Pi is 3.14, and they tell us that the radius is 5, okay? So now I can figure out what the circumference is. When looking at this, remember the commutative property of multiplication says that you can multiply numbers in any order that you want, and you'll still get the same answer. And that's not true with division, but it is with multiplication. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking it would be quite easy just to multiply 2 times 10 and then 10 times 3.14. So that's what I'm going to do. 2 times 5 is 10, and then I'll multiply that by 3.14. And if you know your powers of 10 when multiplying, you know that multiplying by 10 just moves your decimal over one place, okay? So, but if you didn't know that, you could take 3.14 times 10, and you move your decimal twice, and you get 31.4. So the circumference is 31.4, and the unit is meters. So this would be your final answer right here. All right. Okay, let's move on to number 6. What is the width of a rectangle with a length of 15 feet and an area of 90 feet squared? Okay, so they're giving us area, okay? And they're talking about the shape of a rectangle. Okay, so I'm going to find the area. We're going to find part of the area of a rectangle. So here's my rectangle. And it says that it's asking for the width. So I'm going to try to find this right here. They tell me that the length is 15. So this is 15, this is 15. And then they tell me that the area equals 90 feet squared. Okay. So I need to know what the formula is for the area of a rectangle. And I know that the area of a rectangle is length times width. So I'm going to plug in what they give me. They tell me that the area is 90. They tell me that the length is 15. Now all I have to do is find the width, and I've just created a one-step equation. We need to isolate that W, and we will do that by dividing both sides by 15. Okay. And then we get 6 equals the width. But again, we want the units. So 6 feet equals the width, right? And then this is your final answer. Okay, number 7. What is the height of a triangle with a base of 7 and an area of 14? So they mentioned triangle, they mentioned area. So we're going to use the area formula for a triangle, very similar to what we did in example 4. So I'm going to draw out my triangle. It's asking for the height again. And it tells us that the base is 7 feet. And it tells us that the area is 14 feet squared. So I'm going to write down the area, the formula for the area of a triangle, which is base times height divided by 2. And I'm going to plug in the values I'm given. So the area is 14. The base is 7. We don't know what the height is, and we're going to divide by 2. So this is an example of, you know, I said you can divide 7 divided by 2, right? And then divide both sides by 3.5, which is what 7 divided by 2 is. But I don't like working with decimals. I like working with fractions better. So instead, what I will do is I will multiply both sides by 2. This gets rid of this 2. They cancel each other out. So I'm going to multiply this side by 2. I'm going to multiply this side by 2. These cancel out. And I am left with 28 equals 7H. To me, this is easier. To some of you, it may not be. If you want to divide 14 by 3.5, you can. There's always more ways than one to solve problems in algebra. Okay, and then I get 4 as the height, and my unit is 4 feet equals the height. Okay. All right, we have one more. What is the length of a rectangle with a perimeter of 16 and a width of 2? So still we're dealing with a rectangle, but instead of area this time, it's perimeter. So I'm going to draw my rectangle. And it has a perimeter of 16 centimeters, and it has a width of 2 centimeters. And it asks, what is the length here? So I'm going to use the perimeter formula for a rectangle. If you don't know what that is, come over here. Perimeter of a rectangle is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So I'm going to write that out. And I'm going to plug in the values I'm given. I'm told that the perimeter is 16. I don't know what the length is, so I'm just going to leave that as 2L, but I do know that my width is 2 centimeters, so it's going to be 2 times 2. Okay, and I just begin to solve. So I have 16 equals 2L plus 4. And then I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides, and I'm going to bring this up. And I end up with 12 equals 2L, divide by 2. 6 is my length. 6 what? 6 centimeters is the length. All right, so that is our lesson 1.3 on literal equations. And that concludes our lesson for today. Thank you.